I am Halli Casser-Jayne, and welcome to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, where along with my partner in politics, former White House correspondent Matthew Cooper, we slice and dice all things politics, and some days, Donald Trump, too. This week on the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, we bring you some sobering statistics. Under the watch of Donald Trump, 77,000 precious American souls are dead from COVID-19. The result of a foreign policy blunder? That question we ask the author of an important new book on foreign policy, Dr. Stephen Krasner. His book, How to Make Love to a Despot, is shaking up the foreign policy crowd. The podcast is posted at hallicasserjayne.com and is available on all your favorite apps. Let's get started. We begin with Matthew Cooper and our weekly take on the political scene. Here we go. Welcome, my friends. Here's where we are this week. 74,000 plus dead American souls. America has more confirmed cases of the virus than any other country. Americans died from COVID-19 at the rate of about one every, listen to this guys, 42 seconds in the last month. 33 million Americans are unemployed. And Trump is asking us all to risk our lives, go back to work, whatever. What? For a plate of sushi? Good morning, Matt. How are you this fine morning?
I'm doing okay.
Pretty scary stuff, huh?
It's not good. It's not good.
Okay, today
you're really in the thick of it down in Florida.
It's a pretty scary place here. Pretty scary place. As I was telling you off air, don't go out, folks, because there are normal people and there are Trumpsters who have become killing machines. They don't wear masks. And if you ask them, they don't distance. And if you ask them to move, some of them will spit at you. That's how crazy it is down here.
Ugh. Spitting at people, never a good idea. Pandemic or not. Just
there you
never
go.
A good idea to spit at people.
And what did you say to me off air? It's like murder, right?
Attempted murder with the spitting.
It's murder. It's the stress level here is really quite extraordinary. I don't talk to anybody who isn't completely freaked out at this point.
Yeah.
Part of the problem down here is I don't think there's anybody who also doesn't believe that there are big fake numbers coming out of Florida. There was a big piece this morning about it. We talked about it last week in terms of the governor is not letting the medical examiner put out the numbers. And now numbers have been put out that have absolutely no rationale. They're different if they come from this part of the government, different if they come from that. I do know somebody, they did one of those mobile tests in my community. They were able to test about 1,000 people, and then they were shut down. Why? Because the people who were doing the testing were not properly geared, and all the tests were invalidated. It's a creepy, weird place, Florida. How is it in Washington?
Yeah, so are there any restrictions at the moment? What's the deal?
Excuse me. There are restrictions. They're very slowly trying to get it back in, 25%. Restaurants, which I think I mentioned, is meaningless because you can't open your restaurant if you can only have 25% capacity. They're saying you can go outside. You can put plates and tables outside at a distance, but that's not going to work because nobody has that kind of property. They're phasing in, but what the governor is actually running up against is it's not flatlined here. It's climbing here. It's just different hotspots. But of course, what does that matter? Because what did Trump just do? He just threw out all of that wonderful work by Fauci and Twirl Girl Birx, with the plan. The plan's been tossed. Did you see that this morning? No more plan. Just do what you want to do, governors.
Do what you want to do.
Yeah. Do what you want to do. When Georgia opened up, their case went skyrocketing, by the way. And also, they're tracking people coming from neighboring states to get haircuts. Some of them, as my friend said to me on Twitter this morning, from Florida. There are no borders. This is America.
Yeah.
My health depends on your state. That's where we are.
Yeah, I mean, it's one country. And yeah, obviously this, it's one country, and it's a global world too, and
yeah,
what happens in one place affects another, and clearly it's a complicated situation.
Second half of the show today. I want to tell you very quickly. Yeah. I have a very good friend of mine. His name is Stephen Krasner, Dr. Krasner. He's at great professor at Stanford, worked for the Bush, was in the State Department, listen to this title for this book, How to Make Love to a Despot. How funny is that? We talk about coronavirus.
I love that.
Isn't that a wonderful title? We talk about coronavirus being a foreign policy blunder. What is going to happen? We're doing nothing here. You cannot stop travel completely. You know what everybody's trying to do in all those other countries out there, and we are keeping the pandemic going. This is going to turn into a big foreign policy mess eventually, if it's not already, to your point just made, that we don't live in on an island any longer.
No. It's it's a mess. It's a mess.
Yeah. What'd you want to say? You had something brewing. I could feel it.
No, I don't have anything really to add. I think we're all in this dilemma of how do you open things up gradually? How do you do it sensibly? How do you protect the most vulnerable people? It clearly still seems to be toughest on the elderly, not exclusively the elderly, but toughest on them. How do you protect those people the most? And how do you do this in a way that's, sensible? And, it doesn't make sense if you have the president's task force saying one thing and the president saying another, and different governors moving at wildly different paces. So, we're in a bad place, even as there's sort of, somewhat encouraging news, as places like New York and others see some flattening of the curve.
Of course, the curve means nothing.
That's where we're at.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. I know,
sure.
You're an independent contractor, but if you were working and had to go out to work every day, and tomorrow the mayor of DC said, we're open. That's it. You don't go back to work. You don't get paid. You don't get unemployment. Would you go?
Well, I got some savings, so I don't need to go tomorrow. But, if I didn't have any savings, young kids.
No, but would you go? Sure. I just want to know, forget your savings. Would you?
What else would I do? I mean, I wouldn't have, it really depends if you have a choice and you had some discretion. I mean, if you have no discretion, yeah.
So the little guy has to take it on the chin with their life, possibly, for the big guy who's sitting in his ivory tower on Fifth Avenue.
I think that's been the case so far with all the delivery people and first responders and others. But yeah, no question. I mean, more people with fewer means are taking greater risks. I think that's been the case from the beginning, and it's the case more so now. And look at the cases starting to pop up in the Amazon warehouses and whatnot.
So scary. That's been going on for a while and whatever. But I was glad to see that Chris Coons and Bill Kristol. Yeah, it's because it's wherever people are crowded. I was glad to see Chris Coons with Bill Kristol, Democrat, Republican, put a piece out in USA Today saying, Republican Party seems to be their position that the employer should get a waiver of liability if their workplace turns out to be unsafe, but employees should lose unemployment benefits so they won't return to that unsafe workplace. A Democrat, a real Republican, because, Trump people aren't real Republicans. And I thought, okay, we're getting somewhere here, folks. This is like, there's a crowd of people who are level-headed on both sides of the aisle, if you will. I want to say this also. Andrew Cuomo said something yesterday. I don't know if you saw it, but he said that the testing is showing that people who did hole up in New York are testing positive. Did you see that?
I did not see that.
Yeah, this is going to be big. It hasn't percolated up through the system yet. But I want to say this about that, because I know Trump is going to take that and run with that like a crazy man. It's a false premise. It's cruise ship what was that disease that goes around cruise ships that started in the air conditioners? Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Whatever the hell the name of that was. That's what this is about. What this is proving is that this virus does travel through ducts and airwaves. That's what it's proving, which is why you're seeing what's happening in meat plants and Amazon, etc. You don't even have to be next to the person. You can be in the next apartment building, because New York is apartment buildings. It's not houses. It's apartments, 20 on a floor, right? In some buildings. That's what that's telling me that's about. And that's very scary. That's very, very scary.
Yeah, it is. It is.
And how do you kill it in a building?
Well, these are all the right questions we asked.
Right. Yeah. So that to me should have been the main story this morning. Nope. Nothing about it, except that Andrew Cuomo said it and somewhere, whatever. I think I saw one story that said you may be safer outside than inside. Well, that's like earthquakes. So I thought I'd throw that out. Wait, here's another one. What's with this? Did you read this one this morning? You can't, if you've had coronavirus, you can't join the military. Did you see that? That made my voice go up 12 octaves.
I did see that. I saw the headline. I didn't read the rationale. I don't quite get it. I would think you'd be safer if you had it, because you might have some degree of immunity.
I think what they're trying to say is there may be no immunity.
Yeah, but in which case, why recruit anyone, for the military?
Well, they're saying don't bring it in. Don't bring it in.
Right.
Yeah. I have a plot for a novel. A scary novel. I'm not going to give it away. I'm going to talk to you about it off air. It's too good to give away for free. But I am going to say this. Trump goes to the plant in Arizona where they're making masks, and he doesn't put on a mask.
Yeah, not... Yeah, not good. That kind of vanity.
Yeah. All right. Let me take this to where it's more than vanity. I have discerned that Trump's got an election strategy right now. We both know that he does. You can title it Gaslight. You can title it Mission Accomplished. Right? Trump is asking people to dive into the shallow end of a pool for him. And this is how he's doing it. I want to hear what you think about my theory here. 1, blame China. 2, he started questioning the numbers on the amount of deaths. He's saying, nah, they're all lies. 3, open up economy. Everything's hunky-dory. Don't wear a mask because there is no coronavirus. It's all a left-wing scam. I keep getting things from him in the mail that are calling me a warrior and telling me that the left is a mob and this is war. So he's ginning up the base for a civil war. Give it to the states so he doesn't have to take the blame. Separate red states from blue states. Now he's saying he's not going to give money to the blue states, right? Bankrupt them. They're the bad guys. Know that people of color, not his voters, are the ones who are dying. No Fauci, no Birx, no coronavirus. What do you think?
Well, there's something to that. I mean, I think he's certainly, downplayed it from the beginning, and he's downplaying it again now. And I think there's a lot of reasons to think he doesn't take the threat seriously, and that he sees political gain in trying to get people back to work.
Do you think he doesn't take it seriously, or do you think he takes it seriously and doesn't give a hoot?
Could be both. Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think a normal president would be much more popular right now. And you see it with the governors, the ones who are acting, in a zone of competence, Republicans and Democrats. And, he's in a different place. And, but whatever he does, there is going to be a certain truth, right? I mean, if deaths spike, if people are really freaked out about grandma, if people are scared themselves to go out, then this is not going to work. I don't think.
I don't know. I'm trying to remember how I started this? Every 40 seconds, somebody dies, in America. 76 or 77,000, almost 80,000 are dead. And it doesn't seem to matter to many. I mean, you're on Twitter. Look at the people who are on Twitter and they're going, you coward, go back to work. I mean, I don't.
Well, I try not to spend too much time
I know
on
you
Twitter,
do.
but I know what you mean. There are definitely people who are in
yeah, it's 44%, give or take a few Americans.
You mean his popularity? Yeah.
Well, those are people who are sticking with it, and they're the ones who are saying, have at it, and let's go back to work, and this is all a scam, and we buy it, and we've been saying for 4 years almost, what is it going to take to get these people to get reality? And
right,
it ain't death. It isn't even death.
Yeah, right. Well, we're going to see come November in the upper Midwest when it's cold, and there's a good chance of another wave of this that's even worse than what we're going through now.
They're not going to be able to vote because the only way they would possibly be able to vote would have been mail-in votes, and now Trump has appointed one of his top donors to run the United States Postal Service so that they can stop mail-in voting.
Well, if people can't vote, then
then we have World War. Then
coronavirus doesn't matter anyway if people aren't voting. But I understand what you're saying. Let's see how it plays out.
Let's talk about the polls. Biden 44, Trump 34, 56% of women versus 44 Biden. There is an outlier Gallup poll. Did you see it? I haven't been trusting Gallup for a while because they've been really weird. They've got them at 49%. It's the only one I think that does. What do you think? Too early? Too nationalized? Too early?
Yeah, too nationalized. Too early. That doesn't mean much yet. Trump should be more popular. He should be a lot. Crises tend to elevate presidents. Mm-hmm. Whatever he's doing, it's not really elevating him. We'll see how Biden fares as time goes on. But I wouldn't read too much into anything right now in terms of polling. I think people are even more checked out of the presidential race than usual.
Oh, really? Oh, that's an interesting statement.
Well, I just think people are very involved in their own lives right now.
What life? There's
survival.
No life.
Right. But, the combination of fear of death and a depression. I mean, at least in the depression, you didn't think you'd get sick, but,
Yeah. What about the Senate races? Cory Gardner in trouble. Steve Bullock, I think now pulling 4 over Dane's Mark Kelly McSally race.
Yeah, well, look, I think this, I think change versus more of the same is always a key theme, and I think that's tough for Republican incumbents. I think it's tough in a lot of these states, but we'll see if they
even
can
Lindsey
pull
Graham
it out.
is in trouble.
Yeah, I think no question Democrats could take the Senate.
So if you were putting your money on all of this today, because we got nothing today, let's have a fun day. You going for Biden or Trump?
At the moment, and it's really tentative, I would say Biden, and Dems take the Senate. I think there's going to be
a wave.
Look, I think unemployment's going to be nuclear. And people are going to be dying. I think that's, if Democrats can't win in that environment.
Oh my God.
That's, it doesn't get.
You made me laugh. Thank you so much.
It doesn't get more fertile if it's like it's like Hoover plus disease.
Really bizarre though. Just really bizarre. But I go back to what I said before. This is not going to be meaningful to anybody until some really intrepid reporter puts on gear and gets into the hospitals and starts filming the reality of what's going on, or goes to Potter's Field off New York and sees the dead bodies being buried. I for that matter, I don't even understand why nobody has done that yet. on a really there's no filming in these hospitals.
Yeah, one would have to sneak in to do it.
But why?
If you're
a hospital, if you own a hospital and you're losing your shirt and you're losing your workers and you're doing everything, wouldn't you say, "Come on, press, let me show you the real story, the one that you're not seeing"?
Well, the problem is you got privacy laws and such. If you're a hospital administrator, you can't really invite the press in to come.
So break in.
Well, you're welcome to.
Not me. I'm too old. I did my time on that. I did my time in war zones. Thank you.
Right. No, I hear you.
Yeah. No. It does worry me, the fact that
no, I do agree that without sort of more.
You have to show the morbid side.
I mean, I think this is why the AIDS quilt was a big deal back in the
right, because it showed
back in the 80s. Yeah. It offered a kind of visual for how many people were dying, and which is hard to do, and that's back when it was easier to get a sense of people in their last days. Yeah, no, I take your point. Yeah,
if I were an editor in a very famous magazine, which you should be again, I would be. That's what I would do. You want to sell a cover? There's your cover. Okay, the ad of our generation was shown this week. Mourning, Mourning in America. Talk to us about that. Put up by the Lincoln Project.
Right. Well, a group of anti-Trump Republicans, mostly political consultants, have banded together to do a number of things to try to defeat Trump. And their most successful effort to date was an ad they put out this week called Mourning in America, as you said, Mour. And it's a bit of a play on Ronald Reagan's 1984 re-election ad, Mourning in America, Mourning, which was a very successful ad that, captured the sort of uplifting spirit of the time when the economy was so coming back strongly from a very deep recession, and a famous ad. And this one is just the opposite. It just shows, the country in a economic spiral, in a healthcare, illness, pandemic spiral. And Trump gave the ad a lot of attention. A normal president would ignore something like that, but instead Trump, attacked all the individual consultants by name. Normally presidents don't punch down and start messing around with individual citizens. But Trump gave it a lot of attention, so the thing got millions more views, and they're vowing to do more ads. Is their work going to actually move votes? I don't know, but Trump hasn't helped himself in the last day or so since this ad came out, and the ad's pretty, it's pretty effective. It contrasts Trump's, chipper and optimistic views or dismissive views of the virus versus the reality on the ground. What did you think of it?
Well, it was astonishing, absolutely astonishing. I mean, it hits home. It's because it's talking about the very things we were just talking about a moment before. It's bringing reality into here's where we are, folks. So I thought it was very, very effective. I was blown away by two things about it. One is that in that next day, in the middle of the night, when he obviously couldn't sleep, and by the way, Trump really does look like hell. George Conway, married to what's her name? His wife. What's her name? Kellyanne, who was Trump's right hand lady, if you will, and has stuck with him through thick and through thin. George's mother, I think, was Filipino or is Filipino.
That's correct.
And Trump called him, besides Kellyanne's crazy husband who's lost it, Moonface, a known racial slur for people of Asian background, and not a word from her, and her children are half or a quarter Filipino. I thought that was disgusting. That she should have said something. You cannot allow that kind of thing to. You've got children you have to protect. This woman has absolutely no maternal instincts whatsoever, as far as I'm concerned. So that really ticked me off. But here's the other thing about that ad, Matt, and this is the most important part. We only have a minute or two to discuss it, and that is It seems to me that this group, the Lincoln Project, and these, never Trumpers, once Republicans, a lot of them have left the party, are running Biden's campaign. Because there's nothing of Biden out there. And the only ones who are breaking through with noise are these guys. So I think it's terrific because I think Biden should be quiet right now and let Trump, do himself in at this point. Nobody's in any rush to get into the, hand-to-hand combat. But right now, I do think that this Lincoln Project is running the campaign. It's brilliant.
Yeah, they're certainly at the tip of the spear at the moment.
So it seems. And they're much better at, hand-to-hand combat because they're Republicans. Democrats don't know how to play that. So I'm excited about that. I think that's a good thing. Let them show them the way. Because between James Carville bubbling up a little bit, and he knows how to play it, and the Lincoln Project, maybe Dems have a chance to win.
We're going to find out.
We're going to find out. I'm going to end on this. I don't know if you saw this. Did you see that Netanyahu was given the go-ahead to form the government? Supreme Court?
Yeah, it's the endless election over there.
Well, it's over now. He won.
It does seem that way. It does seem he's got the deal with the other party to go ahead and form a government, and his legal troubles aren't going to prevent him from doing that. And he's going to form this unity government with his rivals, but be the prime minister. And no one's got more lives. No one's got a longer run than him.
Man's brilliant. World. Man's brilliant. And as we were on air, I got a text. Supreme Court tossed out the Bridgegate convictions. If you don't know the story of Bridgegate, near my hometown in New Jersey, in Fort Lee, do look it up. It's a hell of a story. I don't quite get why the Supreme Court.
Chris Christie. Yeah. Right. Closing the George Washington Bridge.
Right. Why the Supreme Court threw that out, I don't know. There you go. Anything you want to say before we say see you next week?
Well, let's just hope for everybody's health and safety in this difficult time.
Absolutely. Be safe, my friend. Talk to you soon.
You too. You too. Right. Stay safe down there.
All right. Bye. You were listening to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show posts new podcasts weekly at hallicasserjayne.com and is available wherever you listen to your podcasts. Be sure to find us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, on all your favorite apps. You can find the Halli Casser-Jayne Show on your Alexa device, too. Just say the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. Oh, and come play with me on Twitter at the Halli CJ Show. In the age of a global pandemic, an important conversation on American foreign policy seems warranted. Consider that since the end of the Second World War, the United States has sunk hundreds of billions of dollars into foreign economies, and the hope that its investment would help remake the world in its own image. So far, the returns have been disappointing. As country after country failed to conform to America's utopian hopes, a more dystopian vision has taken hold, as America now recoils from engaging. Aware of these problems, prominent scholar Dr. Stephen Krasner challenges America's longtime foreign policy in his new book, How to Make Love to a Despot. The Stanford University professor and former diplomat urges policymakers to get real, accept the facts on the ground, and recalibrate U.S. expectations to more achievable goals abroad. Let's talk with Dr. Stephen Krasner. Well, I'm going to call you Dr. Krasner first, and then I'm going to be familiar and say, hi, Steve. Nice to have you here. How to Make Love to a Despot. Can I just tell you that's like one of the great titles of all time?
Sorry, I can't claim that it was mine. It came from the publisher.
Well, they did a great job. Very interesting book, very timely. But before we begin, I'd like you to give us an overview of U.S. foreign policy since World War II. Where have we been? What's the model that we start with?
So I think we started right after World War II with a vision of what we needed to do to prevent, fascist regimes from coming to power. We were very unsuccessful in Vietnam and then very successful with the breakup of the Soviet Union, which we did not anticipate. And then have clearly, in my view, failed in Afghanistan and Iraq. So we had a view of what the world would be like. I think we did great in the period immediately after the Second World War, and have done relatively badly since. I mean, we did great in that we made Germany and Japan into thriving democracies. We supported the creation of the European Union, and in the rest of the world, we didn't do so well.
Okay, so talk to me about this. Those great achievements, but then there weren't. What happened? What went wrong?
So I think two good things happened. I mean, especially if you look at Japan, which offers, I think, a very clear case. MacArthur, who was the American viceroy in Japan, offered to turn Japan wanted Japan to be a democracy, allied himself with the emperor, who could have been tried as a war criminal as well as an ally. And I think the Japanese elite looked at the situation which they were confronting and said, wow, we have a choice of allying with the Americans, and maybe we'll preserve at least part of the system we had in the past, or the country's going to go far to the left and we'll all be destroyed. So I think we made very wise choices in allying ourselves in Germany and Japan with elites that we didn't necessarily see eye to eye with, but had a lot of authority within the country. If you look at Europe, I mean, we wanted to prevent another war in Europe. We wanted to make sure we had control of Western Europe, North America, and East Asia, which were the industrial centers of the world. And we did very well. I think our policy was actually very far-sighted. We wanted an open trading system. We didn't want competing devaluations, which you'd had before the Second World War. We supported the creation of the European Union. We at first thought we might be, Roosevelt thought he might be able to do business with the Soviet Union. That proved not to be the case. The Soviet Union actually was pretty successful in ruling Eastern Europe for 45 years and ruling the satellite states. So I think initially we did great because I think the initial conditions were excellent, and because I think, fascism, which was challenging democracy, had been totally delegitimated by the way in which Germany and Japan were defeated in the Second World War.
But we didn't do great.
I think if you look at the developing world, we didn't do great. We had a sort of rhetoric for supporting democracy. In fact, we supported a lot of autocratic rulers before the Soviet Union collapsed. And after the Soviet Union collapsed, we had this unipolar moment for about 10 years, and we thought, okay, we're going to turn Russia into a democracy. We'll turn Afghanistan and Iraq into democracies, and that proved to be totally unsuccessful.
Hubris involved by the leaders?
Hubris, yes, but the hubris very much reflected, in my view, something that was readily understandable for the American public. And the American public said, look, if we're going to become involved with other countries, we have to make the world safe for democracy, which meant creating a lot of democratic states. And I think our problem has been that we haven't been able to discern anything that's in between Somalia, which is a place that's totally fallen apart, and Denmark, which is a very successful democratic country. And yet I think to become a wealthy democratic state, to have a consolidated democracy, is something that's been pretty unusual in human history and requires both structural conditions. It's good if you're wealthy rather than poor. It's good if you had some experience with democracy in the past, and also requires a lot of good luck. If the weather had been bad in the English Channel in 1940, when the British were taking 300,000 people off the beaches at Dunkirk, the Second World War could have been very different.
Good point. Regional perspective. For instance, what works in Venezuela might not work in Afghanistan. All despots are not the same. By the same token, what happens in Venezuela doesn't necessarily stay in Venezuela. So what about that global perspective, too? This is complex stuff you're throwing at us.
Right. The one prescription that I think we ought to follow is make sure that we have local elites that we can ally with that will at least complement our interests. That's the one thing. I think autocrats are different. In Venezuela, you might be able to have a single regime. Maduro seems to have done this, and seems to have succeeded, ruling the whole country. In Afghanistan, it's not evident at all that the country can be effectively ruled from Kabul, and never has been, really.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And it throws everything in sort of a schism. Let's talk this. We came out of World War II, had a policy framework, had a style, knew where we were going. Years passed, then 9/11. So I want to talk to you about 9/11 in terms of reacted rather than acted into response to what happened.
Well, I think we certainly reacted, but I think a big change, I mean, one of the big changes in the post-World War II international system is that actors with relatively small material capabilities can kill thousands or even hundreds of thousands or even millions of people. I mean, so it's hard to get a hold of a nuclear weapon, but it could happen. Steve Cole reports in his book that a couple of Pakistani naval officers actually wanted to smuggle some nuclear weapons onto Pakistani ships in the Indian Ocean. If we look at COVID-19, the fact is the world is very closely connected. I mean, as far as we know now, this was not an engineered virus. It has a relatively low death rate. Mortality rate is around 1 or 2%. But imagine creating a pathogen which had a death rate of 20 or 30%, which isn't very hard to do and will become increasingly easy over time. You know, two of my colleagues who are, one of them's in the law school at Harvard and the other writes from Washington, D.C. I wrote a book a few years ago in which they said, look, you get a disgruntled MA student, he buys pieces of the smallpox vaccine, he puts them together, he goes and hangs out at O'Hare Airport for a couple of weeks before you really get sick and die, and infects millions of people and starts a global pandemic. I mean, that could happen.
Steve, I didn't have you on the show for you to freak everybody out more than they were already freaked out.
Well, it was hard to happen in the past. You know, I mean, if you were killing people with dynamite, or you were killing them with, especially if you're killing them with swords, I mean, maybe you could kill 5 or 6 people, maybe you could kill scores of people. Now you can really kill millions of people without necessarily having a lot of resources. And we have to face up that that's the world that we live in. I mean, it is somewhat dangerous.
No question about it. And we're going to go into that in a little minute. Let me take you back to something, though. I want to say this. In talking about this 9/11, did we get thrown off of our game? That's a question that I think we need to talk about.
I think we did, and there's a big but. So I was actually working at the State Department when 9/11 took place. I think, George Bush wanted to find a way, who was president, and wanted to find a way to respond to 9/11. And if you look at the 2002 National Security Strategy, what he said was, we have to deal with root causes. The root causes were, according to him, autocratic regimes in parts of the Islamic world. And what we had to do is make those countries into democracies. So in some ways, I mean, we certainly didn't expect 9/11. Was certainly unanticipated. But I mean, we found a solution which was very comprehensible and understandable to many parts of the American public. And that's what I think. I mean, a president has to do that. And what worries me about my policy prescription, which is that we should have much more modest objectives, that we should have good enough governance, that we can't always replace autocratic regimes, is that's actually going to be a pretty hard sell to the American public.
Something that you said, 9/11 wasn't expected. That's a foreign policy mistake. No?
Yeah. So I think it was a total shock. It's granted that maybe you would have been able to put all these dots together, but it would have been pretty hard. And I think, you're in a situation and in a world and in an environment in which actors, whether they're state actors like North Korea or even like Al-Qaeda, non-state actors, can basically kill lots and lots of Americans. I mean, that's not something that we had experienced for the previous period.
Well, that's fair. That's fair. There's a lot to pull together here before we go further. So let me try and do that. Let me talk about you, first of all, telling us what the prescription is you write about in this book. Intervention and makeover in our image, not always such a great idea. Talk to me.
Right. So I think what we need is, basically our idea is that we were going to spread good government around the world. I meant free and fair elections, the end of corruption, a free press, develop political parties. I think that's actually impossible in most countries. There are about 200 countries in the world now, and about, more than 100 of them. I think that's an impossible objective. So I think we should aim more modestly. what we should aim is having a government which can provide securities within its own boundaries. Since if it can't do that, you won't have economic development. I think we can aim at better health, which has been one of the big success stories in the period since the Second World War. And we can aim for economic growth, but recognize that economic growth can't take place if it threatens the position of autocratic rulers. That's a big problem. So we should aim for good enough governance, that is security, some improvement of health, some economic growth, and not good government.
You also write about the U.S. embracing a dystopian vision in which the U.S. can do nothing and save no one. Is that an overcorrection? Is that what's going on now? Is that where Trump is playing?
I do think that's what's going on now. And okay, what's dangerous about that is that these external actors, even relatively weak external actors, can really do a lot of damage to us. So we should think about, by damage, they could kill hundreds of thousands of millions of people with a nuclear weapon, a dirty nuclear weapon, or some sort of pathogen which is artificially engineered. So we should worry about the rest of the world, but don't think we can make the rest of the world exactly like us.
Well, democracy is a noble idea, but it doesn't work for everybody. It's not always the right idea.
Look,
right?
I think democracy is a great idea. Both in terms of individual freedom. And look, if you want to be really wealthy, you can't be afraid that the state is going to grab your money or kill you. So I think that democracy in that sense is an explanation for why we have, why countries have been successful both economically and politically. But democracy is really, really hard. If you look at human history over the last, 100,000 years or 5,000 years, only 30 countries or so have become really democratic and wealthy. All those countries are concentrated in Western Europe, North America, and East Asia. So it's not something we can, it's not the natural order of things. It's not where we naturally end up.
It's interesting. I was thinking about this just yesterday, as a matter of fact, and that is, the democracy may not be the issue here. It's who the people are and who the leaders are that become the issue. And we're living in very strange times. It used to be statesmen, stateswomen, they got in it because that's what they cared about, they cared about democracy. They cared about the greater good. And I think politics has changed that, because politics is now a business, and a lot of the people who are in it and who become the leaders, Steve, they're not necessarily statespeople. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes. So I agree with you. Especially in the United States. I think this situation in which, because of Citizens United and other things, plays a huge role in politics. I think that's a big problem. I think you're absolutely right that a lot of people get into politics because it is a business, and it's a business where they can be successful. It does take a large amount of skill, and not it's skills that not everybody has. But it isn't necessarily because they wanted to make the world better. They might have wanted that when they were 10 years old, but by the time they're 50, they want to just stay in office.
Exactly. We could have a conversation about term limits. All right, so the title of the book is How to Make Love to a Despot. Steve, I've never thought in my life I would ask anybody, how do I make love to a despot?
So I think the way to make love to a despot is to say, look, these guys are here. We can't get rid of them. Don't have a foreign policy which thinks you can get rid of these people. They won't go easily. They are supported by people with guns. So if we're thinking about how to make love to a despot, think about what they themselves want. And I think that means having some security within their own territory because they want to stay in power. It does not mean you're going to be able to get rid of all corruption, since these guys survive with corruption. It does not mean that you're going to have free and fair elections every place, because these people want to make sure that they stay in power. You might be able to have improvements in health, which, as I said, it's been a big success story. Life expectancy around the globe is about 70 years now because it helps to keep people in power. And you may get some economic growth, but don't think you're going to get a kind of economic growth which is going to upend the political system. That's almost impossible. I'm going to say the kind of thing that's happened in Silicon Valley in Northern California, in which you were transformed from a bunch of orchards to one of the centers of high technology and wealth in the world. It's not something that can happen every place.
Even in this game, go ahead. Were you finished?
I was going to say one of the leaders of who was the leader of the uprising in Egypt, ended up living in San Francisco. one of the people, some of the people who developed high technology in Russia ended up living in Palo Alto. They did that because they're not afraid of the state. So I think if we're thinking about how to make love to an autocratic ruler, we have to figure out what these guys want, recognize that we can't displace them, and adopt policies that are in our own interest and also in their interest.
So you flirt with them, basically, right? Keep them happy.
You have to flirt with them and don't think that, look at, Egypt. So you displaced Mubarak. That was great. And you got al-Sisi in his place, which is not clearly any better.
Right. Yeah.
So I think it's right. You do have to recognize that you're not going to be able to displace these people, remove them, have an ideal democratic system. You got to recognize that they or their successors are likely to be autocratic, and we have to figure out policies which they would find acceptable.
You have to give them a reason to want to do better if our way is better.
Yeah, well, the problem is this. So would North Korea be better if they were democratic? If they were like South Korea, they would be. Their per capita income is now about $1,000. South Korea's per capita income is about $25,000. Would Kim Jong-un be better off if North Korea were like South Korea? That's much less clear.
Right. Yeah, I get that.
So, as you said, I think, who's in power makes a lot of difference.
Well, we're living in strange times because you're talking about a measured foreign policy. Makes sense to me, right? But we got a bunch of hotheads running the world right now, including right here.
No, so I agree. I don't think that's wrong. So I think the problem with, the fundamental problem with American foreign policy is that we have we've had two views. You'd have a utopian view and a dystopian view. Utopian view was how we can make everybody into democracies. We failed to do that in most parts of the world. The dystopian view was that we couldn't do anything at all, which is why I think you have under Trump. I think that's a mistake, too, because we could be really threatened by other parts of the world.
Let's talk about another part of the world. Let's go to China. You mentioned it briefly before. Here we have this crazy, Go ahead.
Right,
Take it over. Sure.
Yeah, this will be a test. So I think there are four possibilities for China. One is it becomes rich and remains autocratic. That's possibility one. Possibility two is that it becomes rich and transitions into democracy, which some people clearly thought. Possibility three is that they just sort of stall out and stay a middle-income country and an autocratic country. And possibility four is that the place breaks apart and has internal revolution, which has happened in the past. This will be a test. So I think probability three is most likely. I think for a large country to become really wealthy and remain autocratic is very difficult. And why is it very difficult? Because if you're rich and you have money and the state is all powerful, you're pretty fearful. So, which is one reason why real estate prices in the area that I live have gone up so high, because lots of Chinese have bought houses. Why have they bought houses? Because they don't trust their own government. So I think at least up to now, we've been pretty confident that the American government was not going to steal our money. But getting to the point where the government's not going to steal your money, put you in jail, kill you, that's pretty hard. It hasn't happened in that many places.
Well, I think another thing that is the wealthier country, the more education, the more people know, the more people want.
So that was a standard argument, which I'm trying to somewhat argue against in the book. So there's a kind of a notion that you become, what you need to grow rich is basically technological change and population growth. And then you get richer, and then you get a larger middle class, and the middle class provides a basis for democracy. That's why people thought, that China would become a democratic system. From Nixon through Obama, we bet on China. We said, look, we're going to make China richer. They're going to have a big middle class. They have a big middle class. And the big middle class ultimately will result in China transitioning to a democratic regime. I think that's proven to be very hard to do. So there's no automaticity to it. It's not.
But the kids are uprising. The kids are fighting back. They're defeated, but they keep coming back.
Right. Let me admit that this is something I'm not sure about. So I think, and I'm not sure, I'm really not sure about this. I think it's very hard to displace an autocratic ruler. it's chancy. I mean, you're right. I mean, if you look at China, I mean, people, there are a lot of people in China that are very unhappy with what's happening. But look at Hitler, look at Mao, look at Stalin. I mean, these were guys, Stalin, he arrested everybody, including the spouses of people that met with him every day. He didn't get killed. If you look at Hitler, I don't think Germany, Europe had lots of problems, including anti-Semitism. But was Germany particularly bad? I don't think so. I think it was that Hitler was able to seize control of power. He was able to get people with guns behind him. It became very dangerous to try and overthrow him. Some people tried to do it. They were all aristocrats. So I think once an autocrat seizes power and has support, it's really dangerous to oppose these people. And there are lots of examples where it doesn't happen. If you look at Venezuela now, which is the case that you've raised, and the country is being driven into the ground, it's an economic crisis, has hyperinflation, and Maduro's been able to hang on to power. Why has he been able to hang on to power? Because the military hasn't abandoned them yet.
Yeah, right. I'm going to leave that because there's something I really want to get to. There's no solving. It's up in the air what's going to happen to any of these countries at any given moment. But I want to go to COVID-19 and ask you about it in this respect. Is it a foreign policy failure? Should Trump have had a different relationship? Should more people have at it? I don't have to ask you anymore.
I'm thinking to me about COVID-19 is, could you have, figured out in it? We could easily tell a story now. We're sort of, several months into this crisis about how you could have had a better policy. But I think basically all we can do, the notion that you have foreign regimes that have strong institutions that are autocratic, which is like China. The notion that we're going to be able to figure out what's going on there, I think that's a dream. I think it's very hard to do that. And the problem for China is that even the central government in Beijing can't always figure out what's going on in the provinces. So I think if you're thinking about at least some places, what we need is a higher level. The most important thing we can, look, this disease killed lots of old people. The next disease, and there will be another disease for sure. COVID-19 is not a one-off. Might kill lots of younger people. So I think there are two things that we need. I think we need greater resilience, and I think we should try as best we can to have more effective monitoring at a global level. In some places we could do that. There are places that are very weak public health systems that might accept higher levels of monitoring, either from us or from the World Health Organization, WHO. There are other places that have strong institutions like China or Russia, where I think the hope that we can actually figure out what's going on in those countries is very slight.
So then you're talking a national security issue as well.
It isn't. I think it is a national security issue. I think we do need more resilience. And more resilience means, look, we have to invest in fire departments. Most of the time, it's not a fire. Most of us live our lives without having our houses burned down, but we still have fire departments. We need something like fire departments. We need to have the ability to produce. This time around, we didn't have enough PPE. We didn't have enough ventilators. We didn't have enough hospital beds. We should think about making ourselves more resilient. We should think about having better monitoring systems at a global level, but don't delude yourself into thinking the monitoring systems will be perfect.
And the other thing that I think we need to bring a little manufacturing back into this country so we're not dependent.
That's part of the resilience thing.
Right.
And that's the cost of money. And that's hard for politicians to do, because what you're saying to politicians is, look, you guys should spend money on some bad thing that might happen. Maybe it will happen, maybe it won't happen. And you can see why there's a temptation not to spend that money. That's why it's a good thing that we have fire departments, but not something we could take for granted. We want police because we know that crime can happen all the time. We have fire departments. There might be fires, there might not. It's a good thing. I think it's a good thing that we have fire departments. And I think exactly we should have made ourselves more resilient. We should have had the ability to manufacture these things domestically, but recognize that you won't exactly be able to predict what's going to happen next time.
Let me bring this down to a very human level. There are no heroes among us right now. That's a foreign policy issue. That's my opinion. Leave me with your final thought.
Okay. I think that you're right. There are no heroes. And I'm certainly not a fan of Trump. And what's Trump's it's not that I disagree with every one of his policies, but I think as an individual leader, he's extremely defective, especially for the United States. But then look, let's be honest. You look at the Democratic Party, the people that I would have thought were most competent, most able to be president were not people who got a lot of domestic electoral support. So I think part of the problem, I mean, if you're looking at the United States Senate, so it's right. We maybe we'll be blessed with an angel, someone with a lot of, political authority and a lot of astuteness who will be able to govern the country. But there's no guarantee that will happen. And if you look at a lot of people in the country, if you look at poorly educated whites in the United States, there's a recent book out by a couple of authors at Princeton. I mean, life expectancy has declined, and they call this deaths of despair. It's drugs, alcohol, and suicide. So the system is, it's worked great for some part of the population. For other part of the population, it didn't work so well. So it's true that we don't have any heroes now, but it's not simply the result of not having a great figure emerge for us. It's also the result of structural, I think, conditions in the United States.
It's going to take a hero to fix that. Thank you. What a wonderful book. Really enjoyed talking with you.
Thanks. Thanks for talking with me.
Okay. I've been speaking with Dr. Stephen D. Krasner. His very important book is How to Make Love to a Despot. Dr. Krasner's book is available in fine bookstores everywhere and on Amazon.com. Thank you for tuning in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, a production of Resec LLC. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show posts new podcasts Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, and is available at hallicasserjayne.com and on all your favorite apps. Be sure to visit us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and follow me on Twitter at The Halli CJ Show. Until next time, this is Halli Casser-Jayne.